All right. Words as hidden inferences. Is this where he introduces the Blegs and Rubes?
I do think this is the introduction of the Blegs and Rubes, right?
I think. I mean, it's the first I remember reading of it, but when I
Yeah.
first read these, I read them all out of order. As is tradition.
Yes, it is. Well, the Blegs and Rubes, you have an opaque container, you reach in, pull things out. You feel an egg-shaped object, you pull it out, it's blue. You feel a cube-shaped object, you pull it out, it's red. You keep doing this. After pulling out 11 eggs and 8 cubes, with every egg being blue and every cube being red, if you reach in and feel another egg-shaped object before you pull it out, what will it look like, if you have to guess?
I think you can actually tell a lot about a person or how much fun I'll have talking with them if they don't if they say anything other than blue.
You think someone would say that?
Yeah, especially if they know what you're trying to do here, which is say that you can do logical inference with Bayesian decision making, right?
Okay.
Oh well, you can't. Evidence is just that it could be anything. Could be rainbow stripes, could be a picture of a horse. And anyone who's determined to maintain that evidence is nonsense because evidence is against whatever their pet thing is, whether it's God or something else. I think they're very inclined to say, well, these are the same people who say that absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence when it absolutely is. Anyway, if you ask me to bet, I'd say blue, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right. If someone was like that, I probably would not have a great time talking with them because, are you just trolling me? Unless they are specifically doing it humorously with, a glint in their eye and a smile and all that.
Right. I guess I just remember this again. I think it's the era these were written in, but I remember the New Atheism Wars where talking to people about the validity of just logic as a mental enterprise for how to run one's brain. Not even just
Right.
specifically Bayesian reasoning or anything, just the principles of logic.
Yeah.
And if they're like, well, that, it's what's the point of that? And it's like, what do you mean, what's the point? Because the last 50 times you went to the grocery store, you turned left at this intersection, you're going to turn right this time? It actually does pay dividends in your real life. But
Yeah, speaking of paying dividends in real life, sometimes large yellow striped feline shaped objects leap out at you from the shadows, and you think, yikes, a tiger! And Eliezer says the human brain, for some reason, seems to have been adapted to make this inference quickly, automatically, and without keeping track of its assumptions.
yeah, this
Very
particular
odd.
inference seems pretty well hardwired into us.
Yeah.
I walked to the store a couple nights ago and then ran home carrying groceries, because it was thundering. We've had this crazy weather the last couple weeks. But anyway, so I ran all the way home, didn't, strain anything, carrying groceries or anything, get to the door. And as I reach the doorknob, I see a spider move by my foot. And I jerked my hand back so fast, I twinged my wrist holding the doorknob.
Oh, shit.
And so I had so I don't run into tigers, but I see spiders once in a while. And so that was my, what I didn't think when I saw the spider was, oh, there's a quick moving shape with what appears to be more than 4 legs, and it's moving, kind of towards me. Maybe I should, because if it got to me, I'd die. So I just immediately jumped back, right?
Yeah. And brains are really good at having a lot of inferences about things and objects specifically.
Exactly.
And so, this is where the Blegs and Rubes comes from. Eliezer says, if I name the egg-shaped objects Blegs for blue eggs, and the red cubes Rubes, probably for red cubes, then when I reach in and feel another egg-shaped object, I may think, oh, it's a Bleg, rather than considering all that problem of induction stuff. Whereas, 11 out of 19, 100% of the time that I pulled an egg, it was blue. It's just oh yeah, it's a Bleg. And so you know what you're getting because you have that handle on that concept in your brain.
Right. And, these are super useful shorthands. Right? It takes a lot. It's one syllable, Bleg, as opposed to a blue egg-shaped thingy.
But he does, he's now pointing out the fact that since you have that handle, you have a shortcut in your brain, which is not a perfect representation of the world necessarily and can be abused.
Right. That's the problem. I mean, words as hidden inferences. He doesn't come out and say it, actually. He should, unless I missed it when I read it just now. But the point is you've got the short handle, which applies to this thing, but that can be easily hijacked by subtle inferences that are applied to the handle, right?
This is a follow-up from the previous post we talked about in the last episode, the parable of the hemlock, where Socrates was assumed to be mortal because he was a man. And unfortunately...
As we all know, all men are mortal. So.
Yes. And as he says here, Aristotle laid down rules under which no one could conclude Socrates was human until after he died. Because you can't tell if someone is mortal or not until after they're dead, right? Nonetheless,
well, of course you can, because they're human.
Oh, no! Nonetheless, Aristotle and his students went on concluding that living people were humans. Their brains made the leap to inferred properties such as mortality.
I'm sure you've heard this must be an apocryphal tale, unless like ancient Rome or ancient Greece was just the coolest place ever to hang out. But it's like define a human, and
Mm.
Plato's answer was, well, a featherless biped, and someone plucks a chicken, puts it down. It's like, I bring you Plato's man, right?
Yes, yeah. Behold, a man.
Unless they're a bunch of
Yeah.
like awesome trolls, then that must be a made up story. But I hope it's true. I have mixed feelings about the poor chicken involved, but that aside.
I mean, I'm pretty sure the chicken was already dead.
Oh,
They eat
good.
a lot of chickens.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, because part of Plato's definition didn't require that it be alive. So
Yeah. It would be much harder to swing around a plucked chicken if it was still living. It'd probably be fighting you a lot.
that's a good point.
Yeah, I always picture him holding it up by the neck, so that's why I said swing around.
I pictured him setting it down and having it walk around. So
You have a much less violent imagination, I guess,
I guess,
or less slapstick.
yeah, it was cartoony. Like it just went off in front of a cartoon bomb.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Oh, okay.
yeah, your brain doesn't treat words as logical definitions with no empirical consequences, so neither should you.
Hmm.
I want to read that again because it's that's the most profound sentence of the post. Your brain doesn't treat logical definitions with no empirical consequences, and so neither should you. The mere
Yeah.
act of creating a word can cause your mind to allocate a category and thereby trigger unconscious inferences of similarity.
This is huge, and this is like where the whole words mean things discourse like is pointing at. Obviously, those aren't. This didn't come from that. They're disconnected, but this is a huge part of rationality, of Bayesian rationality, is that there are consequences to having words, and you can't just treat them as like this is the logical definition and it's separate from me, and therefore I will analyze it by its definition. No, they hook into things in your brain, and that has deep effects on how you interact with the world, and you need to take that into consideration at all times.
It might be hard to do it at all times,
Well,
like
you need
if
to be
there's a
aware of
tiger
it at
jumping
least.
at you, but the
Yeah.
point is that especially if you're going to try and have a thoughtful conversation, you
Mm-hmm.
need to realize that if you're using words like conscious or matters or freedom or all these other heavy words, that they're
Mm-hmm.
actually really heavy words with lots of baggage, and it might make sense to either very carefully define them or use other words.
I don't think you can very carefully define them necessarily because of this whole, as he just said, you can't just treat words as logical definitions. And so just using different words may be better if you're having certain kinds of discourse.
Right. Yeah, I guess by carefully define, I almost maybe mean just make up new words with constrained definitions.
Okay,
Or
yeah.
like, if you're saying very common in like, moral philosophy talk, they'll use like the word persons, right?
Yeah.
And depending on the person, they might mean, depending on the usually human saying this, they might mean humans or they might mean beings of moral value, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
really there you're just saying, hey, what are these are you talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
He has an excellent little dig right here. After that line, your brain doesn't treat words as logical definitions with no empirical consequences, and so neither should you. He says, notice how I said you and your brain as if they were different things. He's already using these dark arts against us, or possibly for us.
I think for us, and also I think they are importantly different things.
I think so too, but the fact that he put two different categories, like the next line after that was the mere act of creating a word can cause your mind to allocate a category and trigger unconscious inferences of similarity. The fact that he had two different words for you and your brain did make them in two different categories, even though they're not two different things in reality, and made us think about them in two different ways and analyze how they interact. I don't know, does this make things less legible or more legible to break things down into categories like that?
Specifically with this example, I think it's valuable to look at them as different things. Like me and my brain might often have different goals, right?
Yeah.
And I realize that when I am talking about me, I mean, all that activity is happening between my ears, right? But, my brain might want the donut, but I might want whatever, to be on a diet. So like it's sometimes it's valuable to have that particular delineation up. But what's interesting is like you said, they're importantly very closely the same thing, and just by calling them different things, you can have a conversation at a level you can't if you're equating them.
He ended this with, if you believe that you can define a word any way you like without realizing that your brain goes on categorizing without your conscious oversight, then you won't take the effort to choose your definitions wisely.
Agreed.
I think this is one of the large differences between rats and post rats. Maybe, I don't know. We got to have an episode to find out. But like, I think rats do want to be very explicit and clear in their words and how their words are used. And I think post rats want to be less clear than rats on a lot of words. they both acknowledge that there's a lot of hidden inferences in words that are important and impossible to clarify explicitly, maybe. I think the Brets want to clarify them as much as possible and handle them correctly without muddling. And I think the post-rats think that that would strip them of important aspects of reality and want to acknowledge that there's things here we cannot necessarily illuminate and just accept it without trying to dig deeper into it, because that is an impossibility. I don't know. What do you think?
I would be curious because Brooke said that, she knew people in AI alignment work, and she didn't say if they were post rats or not, but I can't imagine working in an area like that and thinking that legibility wasn't important, right?
Maybe legibility among humans, though, is different from legibility among AIs.
That to me sounds like a sentence of like, the young Earth creationist who is a molecular molecular biologist, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, I put on my science cap from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, and then take it off the rest of the time. It's not impossible, I think, to do that. And I guess I can see the difference between saying, no, look, I actually can put on my robot thinking hat when I'm doing robot work, and I put on my person hat when I'm doing people stuff. I like knowing what people mean when they say stuff, and I like to hope that people understand what I mean when I say stuff.
Yeah.
So that's not something that I would aim for in my discourse.
I agree with you. I think they think that there's some things that you can't pretend that you know, and so pretending you do is harmful. I don't know. We'll have to talk to someone. I see kind of their point is, I guess, what I'm trying to say here, without being completely on board.
That works.
Well, yeah. Anyways, next LessWrong post.
Let's do it.
Extensions and intentions. I think this is the first place I heard a good way of defining red, if you're trying to teach someone red, is you just point to a bunch of different things that are red, like a stop sign, a red shirt, a sunset, blood, and say that red is the thing that all these different things have in common, and let them figure it out.
Yeah, I had a moment, like I read a lot more philosophy when I was younger, and I remember one of my earlier meetups, someone they were doing this, like, all right, well then what's a color? And I remembered the answer from one of Plato's dialogues, where Socrates does this back and forth, and at the end, someone's like, all right, fine, what's a color then? And he's like, something like, it's a property of an object distinct from its shape and size, or something.
Terrible.
Perceptible by sight.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's not the worst thing to give if you're trying to define color from someone, if you're trying to explain to a robot what color is or something, right? Something without eyes. This wouldn't be the worst definition. It's like, it's a thing that an object has that we can see with our eyes that isn't related to its size and shape. If you're spitballing, I don't think that's the worst definition of a color. That said, if you asked me what red was, and I said that, if I said it's a specific version of that, that would give you fuck all, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's like, no, it's the thing that, red delicious apples and fire trucks all have in common, right?
I think I would be much more along the lines of, once someone knows a lot of different colors like red and green and blue and yellow, and they ask what is a color, I'd be like, well, a color is the category that all those things fall into.
The kinds of things that make all those same things similar, that's a color.
Right. If you want to change something from red to blue, you are changing its color.
Right.
We should have kids. We'd be the best dads.
The reason I don't have kids isn't because I think I'd be a bad dad. It's just because I think it would upend my life in a way that I don't particularly want. So
right. It would definitely upend your life.
Yeah.
Speaking about kids, I had to pull this out because it's not relevant in any way, but what the fuck? Eliezer says, I heard this regarding the red definition. I heard this way back in the indistinct blur of my childhood. Checks out so far. Everybody has an indistinct blur of their childhood. In parentheses, when I was 12, my father accidentally deleted all of my computer files. I have no memory of anything before that. I mean, I believe him. I don't think he's lying to me, but I don't think those two things are necessarily causally related.
I mean, unless he's refreshing his memory by going through his hard drives at stuff he wrote or something, right? But
yeah,
this also speaks to the different childhoods that he and I had, because he's, I think, 10 years older than me. But they had a computer in the house when he was 12, and he lost stuff before that. And I'm like, I don't think we had a computer when I was 12.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we did. That would have been right around when we got it. But like, I mean, my dad's a plumber for the city, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom at the time. Like, what use did we have of those newfangled computers and the internets, right? I mean, I had an N64. I was set. So
right? That's all you need. I also wonder, like, does this mean that he has clear, crisp memories of things from 13 onward? Because, like, all of my past is a bit of an indistinct blur, and the more recent parts are more distinct, and, like, really important parts are super distinct, but I don't think having access to computer files would make my past less of a blur. Does he have some kind of superpower or something?
He just has no memory before that. He doesn't say he has great memory of everything since.
Well, I mean, obviously he must have some memory of things before that because he can speak English. He didn't.
Maybe he had to relearn it after his computer file was deleted.
Oh shit!
Um,
This is why he's so into AIs.
or
He's like, I must save my people.
he doesn't remember learning English. Then
Mm,
again, neither do I.
yeah, yeah.
But random. But as long as this is already random, do you remember a part of your life when you weren't able to read?
No.
Me either. And yet I know that happened, around 5 or 6, or, 3 to 5 to 6. I don't know how old kids are when they learn to read. But after they start making memories.
I think that you would have memories of not knowing how to read if you were trying to read something and very frustrated by it. I didn't have that experience.
It's just funny because now, I can see all kinds of words and stuff on my screen and like I can't help but read them, right? Whereas like before it would be just like looking at kanji.
Right, yeah.
Anyway, fun times. In the Project Lawful fic that we're reading, Dathalan, the imaginary world that the protagonist comes from, they had the great screen where everything was blocked off 100 years ago. Maybe their dad just deleted their computer files. Right?
It makes sense now.
So let's look at the straw Vulcans. The Hollywood rationalists are depicted as word obsessed, floating in endless verbal space, disconnected from reality. But the actual traditional rationalists have long insisted on maintaining a tight connection to experience.
I have found from a number of post rats that this is what they think of rats. So I think this is definitely a distinct thing that is still believed.
We'll just have to show them like Julia Galev's at this point, like 10-year-old YouTube video about the straw Vulcan.
Yeah, I mean, like this is kind of the foundational work of rationalism, right? Eliezer sequences, where he specifically says that this is dumb. Concepts map into or hook into your brain on very deep levels. Do the opposite of that. Don't be the Vulcan, and yet somehow it still becomes the stereotype.
Mystery.
I think. I mean, I don't. Well, part of it is also the people that embody rationalism are more verbal intellect like that than the general populace, so it can probably help reinforce stereotypes even if the part of the teachings is to move away from that. But I don't know, a thing again for the future episode.
It probably helps reinforce the stereotype that, here you and I are sitting here having a meta conversations about definitions of words, right?
God damn it, you're right.
So
we stereotypes are true. No,
they just skip past all that, be like, we know what we mean.
we get the vibe.
So intentional, not intentional, intense with an S, intentional definitions versus extensional definitions. I loved this distinction. Intentional is to define a word or phrase in terms of other words, like a dictionary, and extensional is to point to examples. I don't know what the definition of red is in the dictionary, but extensional definition would be fire trucks, etc. I'm gonna have Google define red. A color at the end of the spectrum of next to orange and opposite of violet, as of blood, fire, or rubies. Yeah, at least it gave extensional examples.
Yeah.
But I mean, how useless would that be? Oh, what's red? And like, your 3-year-old asks, well, it's a color at the end of the spectrum of visible light, next to orange, opposite of violet.
Yeah.
Get fucked, kid.
Also, fire's not a great example. Fire has a lot of different colors in it.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. And, barely red, really.
Yeah. Going on the difference between those two, the actual intention, is that how you pronounce it?
I mean, I guess. It sucks because it sounds so much like a more common word, but...
It looks like intention, and I read it as intention when I was reading this, but it's not intention. It's intention?
Yeah.
All right.
Like, because extension is a word, right?
Yeah.
This is intention.
So I believe, I'm just going to say intention.
Yeah, it sounds the same.
All right. The actual intention of my tiger concept would be the neural pattern in my temporal cortex that inspects an incoming signal from the visual cortex to determine whether or not it is a tiger. The actual extension of my tiger concept is everything I call a tiger. You can't capture in words all the details of the cognitive concept. As it exists in your mind, that lets you recognize things as tigers or non-tigers. It's too large. You only communicate maps to concepts or instructions for building concepts. You don't communicate the actual categories as they exist in your mind or in the world. This is the whole thing that I want to point out when people say that rationalists are extremely Vulcan-y. It's like, no, he's explicitly acknowledging that you literally cannot capture those cognitive concepts in words.
Yeah.
Best you can do is point at it.
Exactly. But I mean, that's the thing too. That's... Maybe this would make a bad partner for a debate on, rationality versus post-rationality. But like to me, rationality is just like everything that like you can do cognitively or, you can do physically that affects cognition that is successful. Whatever actually works and wins. certainly hemming and hawing about whether or not this thing is going to eat you while it's trying to eat you is useless, right?
Yeah,
I like this is a good way to put this too. So another reason you can't quote define a word any way you like unquote, you can't directly program concepts into someone else's brain.
exactly.
The way that you do this, the way that I've seen this done, is you make up a word and
I
you define that word very carefully and say, okay, I'm talking about this made up word now.
Well, you know what I see? That's the good way of doing it. You know the bad way of doing it that I see a lot today, especially in the political sphere?
You make up a word or you use a common word and say that they fit in that word even though they don't.
Yes. You take a word that already exists and you hijack it.
I think we mentioned this. I can't remember what other podcast it was on, but there are still people, running around with swastikas and flags and, full blown excited Nazis, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Those people are terrible.
yeah,
And it'd be nice if we had a word that could refer to them.
it used to be such a nice, succinct word too.
Yeah.
But now that it's polluted with, I guess,
Anyone
depending who you're
to the
talking
right
about,
of me.
yeah, everyone, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the fact is like this is one of the things just when it comes to communicating anything in general. I feel like you're understanding what I'm saying. I feel like I'm vaguely understanding what I'm saying, and I feel like you understand. So I can kind of play that back, or I can bounce that back and forth, right? I think I understand your understanding of my understanding of what I said, but I can only be pretty sure. Certainly, what I can't do, if we're talking about something again important or high stakes or complicated, is just count on both of us understanding the word the exact same, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can't define a word any way you like. If you, there should be a parenthetical to that. If you plan on having a meaningful and productive conversation.
Right.
If you don't, then yeah, go nuts.
He ends this with, when you take into account the way the human mind actually pragmatically works, the notion I can define a word any way I like soon becomes I can believe anything I want about a fixed set of objects, or I can move any object I want in or out of a fixed membership test. This is why arguing that XYZ is true by definition is so popular. If definition changes behaved like the empirical null ops they're supposed to be, no one would bother arguing them. But abuse definitions just a little, and they turn into magic wands. In arguments, of course, not in reality.
This reminds me of that venture that, remember when Stephen Colbert saved the elephant population?
I do remember that. Thank God someone did.
Right. So what he had people do was go to Wikipedia and change the number. I think he said on his show, everyone go to Wikipedia and change the number to whatever, some higher number. I forget the specifics.
Yeah.
But this, he made it true by definition. Because Wikipedia is basically the dictionary of the world, right?
It was great, and I'm glad that we have the ability to do this sort of thing.
Problem solved.
Much easier than trying to actually feed elephants or something.
Well, keep them away from poachers.
Yeah,
all those dipshits think that just because their tusks are rare that they are valuable.
Yeah, well, I was about to say, what we could do is make it legal to farm elephants, but it's a whole nother can of worms.
I think that'd actually be really hard. But anyway, what are we doing next time? Are we wrapped up here?
We are wrapped up here. For next time, we will be reading the LessWrong posts, Buy Now or Forever Hold Your Peace, and Similarity Clusters.
Huzzah!